Hi, I'm Mike Dilk and you're listening to the Relax Back UK show, the show that explores all kinds of health topics relevant to you, your family and your friends. Each week I talk to expert guests from a range of backgrounds to inform and entertain you. So please do join the Relax Back UK family and stay tuned.
Hi, and thank you for joining me on the Relax Back UK show. The topic this week is weight loss jabs. My guest is Claire Sambolino. She's a nutritional therapist, and we cover many different aspects of the subject.
It is a lot, but if you look at stats for overweight and obesity, then you'll see that roughly 2/3 of the British population are considered overweight these days. So the market for these weight loss jabs and medications is actually quite big. So in some respects, that statistic is small.
We look at how many people might use these jabs. Are they really a good thing? Perhaps they have some unexpected and unwanted side effects. Also, do they really work in the long run?
So within 1.7 years of cessation of the weight loss medications, roughly 2/3 of the weight came back in these particular studies.
But before we start, I want to invite you along on a cycle ride. I am going to be on my Watt bike on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Fridays at 12:30. You can come and join me on the YouTube channel, which is Relax Back UK. So I'll see you then for a pedal, but stay for now for a great show. Thank you. So my guest is Claire Sambolino. She's a nutritional therapist. Before I started asking her about weight loss jabs, I asked lots of general questions about the qualifications of being a nutritionist and a nutritional therapist. On your bio, it says you're a PSA accredited nutrition practitioner. But the thing is, what I don't understand about that, the PSA is that is the Professional Standards Authority for Health and Social Care. It's a UK government body that oversees health-related regulators and registers. So you can't. It doesn't accredit people. It accredits registers. So you can't actually be a PSA accredited nutrition practitioner. So I suppose my question is, what are you?
I'm on a PSA accredited register. You're very correct in saying that. So nutritionists are an unregulated profession. So anyone in the world can actually call themselves a nutritionist, which not everybody knows. So what we have are voluntary registers. And so as a nutritional therapist, I am registered with the CNHC, which has an accredited register with the PSA, who you mentioned before. So this is a register that all complementary practitioners can sign up to if they've met and adhered to the standards of that register. So in my case, that means being a degree-educated nutritional therapy practitioner.
Okay, you have to tell us what CNHC stands for now.
So CNHC is the complementary, that's a good one. Now you're going to pull me up on that. It's the Complementary Natural Healthcare Council.
Okay. I think the important bit that comes out of that is that nutritionist is not a protected title. So, I could call myself a nutritionist this afternoon and charge people for advice. They'd be bonkers to take it, but I wouldn't be doing anything wrong if I was to do, legally, I wouldn't be doing anything wrong. Morally, quite possibly. So people need to check. Now, for instance, the CNHC, is there a list of members that people can go and check? So whoever they're getting advice from, they can check them out.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go onto the CNHC website, they actually have a register. So it's a voluntary register, as I said. So we candidate ourselves and they check that you have met the standards. In my case, as a nutritional therapist, the standard is that we have to be degree qualified and we have to be a member of the professional body for nutritional therapy practitioners, which is called BANT.
Okay, right. That's another bit of alphabetical soup there. The BANT. Tell us what that one stands for.
So BANT actually stands for the British Association for Nutrition and Lifestyle Medicine, but they've condensed it down into BANT because it's easier to say. And there was a name change a few years ago. So the actual acronym BANT used to stand for British Association of Nutritional Therapists.
Okay. So the CNHC is a subsection of the BANT. Is that right?
No. So BANT is a professional body. So that's the body that actually, it's the professional body that we sign up to and who help us with our ongoing development as nutritional therapy practitioners. They provide education and professional support. And CNHC holds the voluntary register. So they are the body that holds the register and who are accredited by the PSA. It's a minefield. It's very complicated.
It is,
and no
isn't
matter
it?
how many times I say this, it still feels complicated when you repeat it back to somebody else.
Yeah, well, look, thank you very much indeed for going through that, because I mean, it is important that people check who they're dealing with, I think,
I think
and it is
especially
possible to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's especially important. And it's just good to know that there are professional organizations out there who represent fully qualified nutritional therapy practitioners. And as you said, there's nothing to stop other people calling themselves a nutritionist as a sort of umbrella term. So you'll have people across all walks of life in the beauty industry, in the health and exercise industry, all calling themselves nutritionists because they've done a short course or some minor qualification, but they're not fully qualified in clinical practice. And I think that's the key here. So I work with clients in clinical practice and we're doing a therapeutic form of nutrition.
Yeah. All right. I'm not even going to get onto the subject of the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist, because I've taken too much of your time before we get into the main body of what I want to chat about, which is weight loss jabs. All right, so let's move on. Park all that stuff. Weight loss jabs. I get confused as to just how many of them there are.
Well, they're growing.
You're nodding your head, so you're not the only. Yeah. I'm not the only one.
No.
Okay.
You're not the only one. I mean, the three big names that people will most likely have heard of are Ozempic, Mounjaro, and Wegovy. So these are the ones that are kind of making the headlines, that are gaining most interest, and that actually some of the recent studies have been done on. And there are likely others which have different names, but they're all performing the same task.
Okay. And they have taken the UK or the world by storm, haven't they? Why?
Well, I've been discussing this with colleagues and people across the industry, and I think we've never seen something move so fast. So I think that's the thing. When you say it's taken the world by storm, it's the speed with which these medications have been taken up by the general public. So they have been used in medical circles for quite some time within the type 2 diabetes community and within the medically diagnosed obese and overweight community. So they have been used by medical practitioners.
When you say quite some time, what are we talking? 5 years, 20 years, 40 years?
That's a very good question. I'm actually not too sure the full length that they've been in service, but they have been used for, I would say a decade as a ballpark figure, but I actually don't know for sure. Mm-hmm. But to come back to the point with the speed with which they've been rolled out, I think we've never had any other medication that's been so freely accessible to the general public. And that's why they've been taken up so fast over the last, certainly over the last 2 years since they've come into play.
I've spoken to various different people, and I've asked just how many people are using them in the UK, and it appears actually no one really knows.
No, there's no way of tracking it, and this is because roughly 80+% are being sold privately, which means that only 20% are going through the actual healthcare system. Yeah. So through GP, through NHS settings. The rest are all being sourced privately, which means people can buy them from their pharmacies and from other outlets. So we are seeing figures of between 2 and 3 million, but I would guess that they're probably higher.
That is a lot of people. I mean, the population of the UK is 75 million or something tops. Yeah. So as a percentage, this is quite a lot.
It is a lot, but if you look at stats for overweight and obesity, then you'll see that roughly 2/3 of the British population are considered overweight these days. So the market for these weight loss jabs and medications is actually quite big. So in some respects, that statistic is small for the number of people who could potentially choose to use them.
Right. Okay. No. Yeah. Good point. The cost of them has recently gone up a lot, but that doesn't seem to have put people off.
It's not a deterrent. Well, the costs seem to vary from between 100 and 300 a month, depending on where you're sourcing them from and probably depending on which of the brands you're using. I've actually heard estimations that the costs will come down due to the amount of volume that's going to be sold over the coming years. So this could be a benefit for people who are sourcing them privately, not on prescription, that they might see a reduction in costs in the coming years. But again, we don't have any sort of finite data on this. Such, but they are expensive. So if you consider using them for a couple of years, that's a hefty outlay.
Yeah.
100 to 300 a month is a lot of money to be spending.
Absolutely. I mean, I have spoken to people about how the fact that they're so expensive can lead to other dangers, and people look to use them in different ways, or use lower doses, or even get them on the black market and all sorts of things like that, which well, that's another whole topic, really. So
it's a black hole.
Yeah, but it's pretty scary, I think. Suffice to say,
I think it is scary. And I think, coming back to the first point I made, that we haven't had a medication like this that's been made so freely available, through non-medical channels. Typically, any medication that comes into what we would call kind of metabolic health, cardiometabolic health, such as, for cholesterol, you've got your statins and whatnot, but they're nearly all prescribed.
Mm-hmm.
And in this instance, you can now buy these off prescription. And this is what I think opens up the doorway for risk and for caution with these weight loss medications.
Absolutely. Well, on this show, I like data. I like peer-reviewed papers. I like double-blind studies and all this stuff. Now, as far as the safety of these drugs goes, because they were first developed not for weight loss, but for diabetes, there are an awful lot of double-blind studies that prove that they are safe, or safe enough to be used for lots of people. I mean, there are some side effects for sure, but the kind of the medical research suggests that actually they're fine, they're safe, possibly with some provisos. I'm struggling here. Help me a little bit.
There are provisos. If you think about clinical studies, they're done in a very controlled environment, and they're done on a certain population, in this case, people with type 2 diabetes, and there will be a control group, and there'll be the group who are taking the actual weight loss medication. Now, the control and the rigor that goes into clinical trials means that people are being dosed, safely and accordingly to the trial plan. They're being monitored. They're being medically supported throughout. If there are side effects which are deemed to be dangerous to that participant, they will possibly be asked to leave a trial for their own safety. So there's a huge amount of safeguarding that goes into clinical trials. When I go back to thinking about 80% of the purchases of these products are through private purchase, none of that safeguarding is there. So these are people who are self-acquiring medications. They're self-dosing. So we don't know what they're dosing if they're just buying them online. They do not have the support of a medical team around them. So they're not getting them on prescription. They don't get the benefit of their one-to-one with a GP. And so there are no safeguards in this instance at all. There's no wraparound care for many of these people on these medications.
So two things there. I think it's worth saying in these double-blind studies that have been done, they don't include. This is not half a dozen patients. This is thousands. Like, I don't know, 6,000 to 10,000 patients. So that it's well tested. And actually,
they have to.
Can you actually buy this stuff online? If you do buy this stuff online, let's rewind a little bit. If you get this via a GP or a medical professional face to face, they will go through your case. Do you really need them? What are you going to use it for? And they're going to look you in the eye, and they can see if you're overweight or not. They probably stick you on the scales. Online, this also happens, or I'm told this also happens, because very often they'll be online, but they're talking like we are now. We can see each other, and they ask for ID, and there are checks, which in theory should be pretty good.
Well, I guess in theory, yes. I mean, I have no objection to online consults, and we're all using the world of online these days. I certainly use it in my nutrition practice with my clients. I think the world of online, the dangers are when you're not buying them through a regulated source. So pharmacists, if they're doing this kind of check online, will probably have their own methodology for doing that. But online also includes black market. It's including lots of other websites and places where these medications are now available. And I've recently heard talk that even some of the UK supermarkets are going to make them available. So we're moving from a very medical environment to supermarket chains, which is a very different, scenario to find yourself in.
You can't. Surely you can't get them at supermarkets at the moment.
This is unsubstantiated. It's things that I've heard in the recent week, but I've not seen them. I have no evidence.
I can't believe that's going to happen. I'd be horrified if that's unless of course there is a pharmacy in the supermarket, and you talk to the pharmacist and you look them in the eye. You mentioned other sources, okay? So you get online pharmacies, which will do things properly. You mentioned other sources. What have you come across?
I've come across sites that are selling all sorts of, sports and weight loss paraphernalia. So there are lots of other website platforms that are selling things and possibly selling them secondhand. I don't know the supply chain route to some of these people. And I know a lot of people who are turning to the dark web and to more sinister sources to try and find these medications at cheaper prices.
Right. So that is a serious issue. That's not necessarily an issue about the drug. It's about, I don't know, us as a society. There's something actually on the news this morning locally. Apparently, a pharmacy was broken into, and these weight loss drugs were stolen. Lots of them.
Wow.
So this is an issue, big issue potentially, but not necessarily an issue about the drug per se. It's everything else that goes with it.
Yeah. And there is no issue with the drugs per se. They have been tested in clinical trials. And like you say, they've been tested on thousands of people to give the statistical credibility that's needed to test any pharmaceutical drug that comes through. The issue, I think, extends to the lack of care and the lack of support from a nutrition and lifestyle support point of view. So there are just not enough resources within the NHS, and for those who are taking them without medical care, there's certainly not access to resources such as nutritional therapists to help people understand how to, evaluate and look at their diet and their daily habits as to the types of foods they're eating, when they're eating, how they may impact with the symptoms of taking and the side effects of taking weight loss medications, how it might help sustain the weight loss, because what we're seeing in some of the early trials is that the weight loss will come back if you stop taking the medications. So how do you mitigate that? So we need to have this kind of wraparound support, because it's one thing to take a medication that suppresses your appetite. But when you stop taking it and your appetite comes back, if you haven't learned anything in the process about how to eat a healthy, balanced diet, and you go straight back to your old habits, then it makes sense that the weight comes back and there's this rebound effect. So this is, as a nutrition practitioner, my priorities lie.
Let me ask you what might be a bit of an unfair question. I think most people, unless they have had their head in the sand for pretty much all their life, know what they're meant to be eating. We really do. You gotta eat your fruit and veg. You can't have chips every day. You shouldn't drink too much. Everybody actually knows that. The difficult bit, and I think, well, you can tell me if you think I've got the right end of the stick here. The job of a nutritionist is not so much to tell us what to eat, it's to help us to do it. Now, if a drug comes along, that effectively replaces the nutritionist, because suddenly we don't feel hungry, we don't want to eat all these chips and drink gallons of beer. You guys aren't needed anymore. Is that the real problem here, that we're making a fuss about this?
No, not at all. Well, there's lots to extrapolate.
I've got a smile on my face. So my question, you can tell, is not completely serious, but I do want to know.
No, it's a very interesting point that you make there. And what I would start by saying is that nutritional therapy practitioners will help and support people with a lot more than just with weight loss. So weight loss is a big part of what we do, but obviously metabolic health, cardiometabolic health as it's now referred to, so looking at heart health and all of the other aspects of metabolic health, is where we spend a lot of our time, and looking at gut health. So you'll have heard lots of talk about the gut over the last 2 years with things like Zoe and the microbiome and lots of other sort of health programs. So weight loss is a part of what we do, but there are, of course, lots of people who do not need to lose weight and may have other symptoms that they need to address through diet and lifestyle. So the broader scope of what we do extends to way beyond weight loss. what I would also say is that these weight loss medications come with certain side effects which can be considered worrying long term. So the fact that they suppress appetite and in many people cause a lot of digestive symptoms. So that can be anything from nausea to constipation to bloating and the like, means that lots of people just actually refrain from eating. So then there is a risk of malnourishment. So
have you actually come across that? That actually happens?
There are some examples in some of the nutritional literature of that happen. I haven't personally come across an example. But there are some people who suffer great side effects, especially the nausea side effect of these weight loss medications, which basically puts them off eating. Okay, so that's quite a big thing if they're going to start excluding to eat and excluding food groups and nutrient groups, that if it leads to something like malnutrition. There are also lots of reports in the scientific literature about people eating less protein and having muscle wastage as one of the key side effects of these weight loss medications. And again, that's another really important thing that we would look to address because muscle is a much more metabolically dynamic part of our body composition that we want to safeguard. That's what actually protects us and takes us forward into healthy longevity.
Okay, so you say lots of reports. All right, you say we got 2 to 3 million people taking this stuff at the minute. Lots of reports. What we got? Half a dozen? 20? I mean, this kind of stuff is important to know.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I actually don't have a number for that one. It's a good point. Yeah.
As I say, I do like data and statistics, and in a perfect situation, peer-reviewed, published data. There's a lot of talk about when people stop taking these injections, taking is the wrong phrase, isn't it? Stop using these injections. You don't take an injection, I suppose. But anyway, you know what I mean. Either they might stop doing it because they just don't want to do it anymore, or actually it might be too expensive for them. I suppose the reason doesn't really matter, but they stop taking them, stop using them, and then put on lots and lots of weight quite quickly for various different reasons. Now, there's a lot of talk about that. So I've got two questions there, really. Again, numbers. I know some proper academic work has been done on that, but can you tell us about it? And then also, I was going to ask another question about that, and it's slipped my mind. So I might, not to worry, answer the first bit if you can.
So I have one report in front of me, which has been published in the BMJ, which is the British Medical Journal. And in that report, they had over 9,341 participants aged 18 and over with classified overweight or obesity. And it was a study that, a review study that looked at 37 separate, individual systematic review that looked and meta-analysis that looked at 37 individual studies and randomized the data from that. And what they have come out with is that people return to their baseline weight within an average of 1.7 years after stopping using the weight loss medication, and just 1.5 years, and will return, and about 2/3 of their weight will rebound. Sorry, I'm just reading that back to front. So within 1.7 years of cessation of the weight loss medications, roughly 2/3 of the weight came back in these particular studies.
Okay. Does it say why? Do we just go back to our old habits of eating too much chocolate and, too many chips? Or is there something, or is there changes in our body that have happened?
No, the study doesn't say why, but if you understand how the actual weight loss jabs work, what they do is they mimic the actions of a peptide, which is a signaling molecule in the body, to make you feel satiated. So after eating, it gives the signal that you're full. Okay. So presumably when you stop taking that medication, that mimicking of that signal stops. So you go back to your actual biological hunger and satiety signaling methods. Now, if you happen to be eating a diet which is really rich in ultra-processed foods and sugary, fizzy drinks and things like that, these are all of the things that will impact your hormonal ability to signal satiety and hunger. Mm-hmm. So really, nutrition and eating the foods that help you feel satiated, help you feel fuller for longer, and help regulate those hormonal signals would be one of the methods that you would look to provide for somebody coming off a weight loss medication,
Uh,
because you want to ensure that they can achieve the same result through food that they've achieved through a medication.
yeah. And is this something that actually you spend time doing, helping people that are coming off these things to keep up the good work, I suppose?
Well, it's something that we do in traditional weight loss. I wouldn't say that it's something I've been doing a lot of with weight loss medications, because the speed with which they've hit the market is quite, it's quite recent. So I've started seeing some clients now who are on them. But there are lots of things that we will work on with clients when it comes to food choices. And as I was saying, we'll look to increase their protein intake, their fiber intake, things that will signal to the body that you're full and help with those satiety signals. They also are foods that will help balance your blood glucose response to food. So you're not having those kind of peaks of hunger and then those moments where you might reach for and grab something that's less healthy, like snacky. So a lot of the work that we do in sort of foundational nutrition is exactly this. It's helping with those signaling mechanisms within the body.
Goodness. Is there any hope for us with this stressful life we live? UPFs everywhere. All this stuff about these weight loss injections. We're doomed, aren't we?
No, never say that. Never say that. I always carry hope. And I think it's like you said, lots of people do know how we should be eating, but we have lifestyles that are just increasingly busy. We're so time poor. We're racing from pillar to post to here to there. So it's about carving out extra time, which is difficult, but carving out that time to maybe do more meal preps, to spend a little bit more time in the supermarket looking at the back of packs and reading what's in some of the products that you might regularly be purchasing. It's maybe finding extra windows of time to, bulk cook and do some of that batch cooking at the weekend that carries you through the week. But I think people fundamentally, we have a great love of food in the UK. And there's a statistic I've heard a number of times, which is I think we watch more food or cookery related programs in the UK than most of the rest of Europe. And we all know the big ones that are out there.
But if we turn the telly off and spent that time cooking, we might be better off.
This is it. This is my point. So we do have windows of time and we have enjoyment of food. And I think we understand that we all need to eat better, but it is just trying to break it down into manageable bite-sized pieces to build in those healthy habits again and get back to doing what we all know we should be doing.
Okay. Lastly, let me ask, if someone is thinking of starting to use these weight loss jabs, can you suggest a good source of sensible information that kind of gives them advice on where to get them, where to get the appropriate advice, where they're using them, all that kind of stuff? Good, sensible info. A couple of sources, please.
Yeah, in actual fact, my go-to is just to refer them straight back to their GP. Because, I'm a nutrition practitioner, I'm not a medical practitioner, so it's not for me to decide who is a worthy candidate to take them. They really do need to seek medical advice. So I would always direct them back to their GP. And then it's really for their GP to refer on to a local pharmacist to another source if they're not currently handling that within the, within the sort of surgery setting.
That sounds like good advice. People will look online. I haven't looked. Is there anything on the NHS website?
I believe there are some guidance on the NHS website. Yes.
So that's probably a place to try. But get in contact with your GP sounds like good advice.
Yeah, and actually what I would say is get in contact with a nutritional therapist first and foremost, and just have the conversation. We have to eat to live. Like, food is nourishment. If you are concerned about your weight, if you are looking at any other symptomology related to being overweight or obese, then check in with a nutritional therapist at bant.org.uk.
Excellent. Claire, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to chat. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to my guest on this week's show. That was Claire Sambolino, nutritional therapist. Thank you for listening. And before I let you go, I want to remind you about my book, Cut the Crap, Ask the Questions That Matter About Your Health. Lots of people that I've spoken to on the show have their wisdom in the book. It is a great read, and it's actually very useful for anyone who is interested in health, particularly about asking questions about their own health, questions of themselves or their health professional, whoever's helping them with their health. It gets you to ask questions, which is what I like to do on this show for sure. So please do check out the book. It's available on Amazon and have a healthy week. Until next week.
Thanks for listening to the Relax Back UK show. Join me, Mike Dilk, again next week for more fascinating interviews and chat. If you're listening to the podcast version, please subscribe, like, and share it with your family and friends. And have a healthy week. Until next week.